man, do they scream. So I sneaked in very carefully, and that just changed everything. My name is Tom Cantrell. I live in Enumclaw, Washington presently. I lived the prior 30 years before moving back over here in the southeastern corner of Washington, over in the desert side, and got had a lot of activity over there. Have places that are very dear to my heart. I got started in Sasquatch investigation 65 years ago, almost 66 now, back in 1958. And it started with the Jerry Crew incident in Northern California. I grew up in Northern California, and when that happened in 1958, I was 15 years old in high school, and my dad brought it to me. It occurred, and then it got in the newspapers, and he brought me the paper. He said, "What do you think about this?" He always had a way of instilling curiosity in me, anyway, and so I read the article, and wow, that was interesting, and I'd heard of them, but I'd never given any thought to them. And then that happened, and it piqued my interest, and I started reading everything I could get on it. I graduated from high school in 61, joined the Navy, spent 9 years in the Navy, and got out in 68. The Navy transferred me to Washington out on the Olympic Peninsula. And that put me right in the middle of them. And then I could go from reading and studying to actual boots on the ground investigations. And that just changed everything. And since then I've been devoted to them, really. But prior to that, everything was just reading. When you're 300 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, and there's not much chance to do any boots on the ground. Okay. And
Not much
so I had
ground to
to wait till I
do.
got ashore. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned Jerry Crew. I've talked to a nephew of his that's doing a film about that, but some of our
mhm.
audience may not know the Jerry Crew story. So can you just kind of fill us in on what you
Sure.
read in the article that piqued your interest?
Jerry Crew was a cat skinner on a crew building road in Northern California in the Bluff Creek area. And it was remote. It was logging roads, and it was a long way from town. So what they did what we call living in, working out of camp. From Monday through Friday, they would stay in camp and go home Friday after work and for the weekend, then come back Monday. Well, on Monday, the 25th of August, 1958, Jerry Crew came to work. They got up there and he started, to get his cat started running. And here's a set of 16-inch footprints. Came down off the mountain, up the road. Now, you got to, in Northern California, when you build road, there's about 6 or 8 inches of just nothing but loose soil, just duff on the surface. So these tracks stood out like, just very vividly. They came up, they circled his machine, went up the road, circled another machine, and that's the part that got in the newspaper. And then later, I mean, he would come back. These set of tracks would come back that every few days from then on, all the way into October. And the owner of that road building company, Ray Wallace, uh, it's kind of an involved story there. But Ray was in Costa Rica at the time this happened. He was investigating getting them started on their logging of their hardwoods in Costa Rica, and was not even in the country. When he came back, his crew was in chaos. They couldn't keep workers anymore because of these tracks and these beings that were around, scared people off. The only ones who were not bothered by it all were the tribal members from the Hupa Reservation, the Yurok Indian reservations close by that worked for them. And their attitude was kind of, hey, white man's finally getting around to this, huh? Okay. But the rest of them, it shook them up pretty good, and it was hard to keep people. And of course, in that part of California, you can only work till about October, and then maybe into November. And then the rains come and you're done. I mean, you're flat done for the year. And so there was a big push to get these roads done. The block company had bought the timber sales that these roads were going to, and of course they wanted to start logging come spring, and you can't do that if you don't have roads. So he made up a set of fake footprints, and then you could tell her, oh, I did that, that's my footprints. And he did it from actually did that the rest of his life. But when you compare them, there's just absolutely no way of being fooled by this. It's very obvious what you're fake and what you're real, which is when people make fake feet to imitate tracks, the first thing they find out is they don't leave any marks. It's like putting on a set of snowshoes. When a Sasquatch stands, he's putting about 34, 36 pounds per square inch on the ground. When we stand, we're putting about 18 to 20. When you put those feet on, it drops down to like 3 or 4 pounds per square inch. You just don't sink in. It only tracks. So we had to work very hard to do that. And of course, it did help getting the roads built, but nobody who knows anything really believed him. And that's Jerry Crew. That's the Jerry Crew incident. His family still lives in the Willow Creek area, and yeah, he's got nephews down there. And he was quite a guy. Very nice man. And if you notice, there are pictures of he and Andrew Genzoli, the newspaperman from Eureka, California, who did the articles. And Jerry told him he could take his picture with the tracks, with the impressions he'd made, but he was going to smile. He didn't want people to think this was something frivolous, because this was very serious. And that's just the kind of man he was. A noted paleontologist came and investigated him, Dr. Ivan Sanderson. He was probably the primary mammologist in the world at that time. He'd written 13 books on mammals of the world that were the standards in the universities at the time. The man held 5 doctorates. And of course, in those days, we didn't have internet, we didn't have Facebook. So he wrote articles for True and Argosy magazine, which were men's magazines at the time, and outlined the events. He also did it after the Patterson-Gimlin film in 1967, which actually occurred in the same place. Roger and Bob's camp was the campground where the Ray Wallace crew had their equipment dump. So there's kind of a tie-in there. And of course, Bob and Roger went up Bluff Creek 3.5 miles when they had their encounter with Patty. And but it's the very same area.
Well, it sounds interesting. Yeah, I think that would have been a time of kind of an innocence with knowing what we know today about Bigfoot, and because it just wasn't out there much.
No, it was not. And there were occasional reportings, but nobody would really report them to me because the negative was so heavy. I mean, you think it's bad today, you should have seen it then. I mean, even Jerry Crew got ostracized, and of course Bob and Roger, that was criminal what they did to them and their families, and that didn't slow down. The same thing happened with Paul Freeman with his 1992 film that he made in the Walla Walla area of Washington. He thought Paul was one of the nicest guys in the world. He was just a laid back fellow. If you've ever seen that film, and if you haven't, look it up on YouTube. It's very readily available. Paul Freeman Bigfoot account, and in that is when the creature shows up, oh, there she goes. Well, that's high excitement for Paul. That mean he was excited there. That's just how laid back he was. And he thought had the answer for the world. He'd had a sighting in 82 and had pictures and such, but they weren't as good a quality as his 92 sighting. And he was just raked over the coals. His family was made fun of. He had unlisted phone numbers and people would call him and just give him just terrible things that they'd say. And to the kids, his son Michael is doing a series now. Has written a book actually on Paul. Paul's gone now, but I knew Paul very well. When his film came out, they showed it on the local ABC News affiliate in Kennewick, Washington, Tri-Cities, and I happened to see it. And the news director at that station happened to be a friend of mine. We went to church together. And I told him, I said, Tom, I need to talk with this fellow. And he says, well, I can't give you his number. I said, well, can you give him mine? He did. Paul called the next day and we got together several times after that. And there's a book out called Bigfoot of the Blues by Vance Orchard. Vance Orchard was a newspaperman in Walla Walla at the time. And he chronicles the history of that. If you want to see a history of just terrible things that they did, yeah, read that book. There's a friend of Paul's that lives in that area, part Indian fellow, Wes Summerlin. Wes was a tracker. He was a trapper, and he guided people in the mountains. And that's basically what he did for a living for his entire life. When they went on to the ABC show Good Morning America, they just absolutely tore them up. Just, and they'd take phrases, ask a question, they'd answer the question, and then they'd cut the answer off in the middle, edit it out so that it fit what they wanted to say. They asked, for example, they asked Paul, have you ever made fake tracks? He said, well, yes, I have, well, we all have. You make the track to step beside the one that you're investigating to see what the difference is, to show the difference. And, we've all done that. He explained that when it came out on the air, have you ever made fake tracks? Oh, yes, I have. Cut it off right there. It made him, just tried to make him look like a fool. Wes Summerlin, a man who had lived his life in the mountains. They told him he didn't know the difference between what a bear looked like and anything else. That's all he was seeing was a bear. Yeah. That's the type of treatment we get, and it's really not that much better now. And I must say that silly little show Finding Bigfoot really helped. It helped people come out and understand that there are other people in the world. But I myself went through that same type of thing for 35 years. I wouldn't even tell my family what I was doing because all they wanted to do was make a joke out of it, make fun of it. And
Well,
I
let's
knew
go
they
back.
deserved more.
Let's go back to when you started actually going out and looking and so you're only 15 when you saw this film or saw this newspaper article. So from there, what steps did you take to get more information and to start researching?
Just everything I could find that I could read. From the time I was 15 in 1958 until 1970 when the Navy transferred me to Washington. All I could do was just read and study. Everything I could get my hands on, I read. And 1970, I was living on the north end of the Olympic Peninsula. And of course, that's nature's back door for Sasquatch. And that's, then I started seeing actual sign and started seeing I got a degree after I got out of the Navy in logging engineering. And I did a lot of field work as such. And one of the things I did a lot of was bridge site surveys in our state. If you're going to build a road that crosses a stream used by anadromous fish runs, salmon, steelhead, those that go to sea and then come back to spawn, you have to have a permit from the state. In order to get that permit, you have to have a plan. And so they would hire me to go in and do the plan for them. And the ones I got were always 6, 7, 8 miles off any existing road. Their company engineers did the ones alongside the road. I always had to hike in a half a day to get there. And when I did that, I learned really quickly that you do not walk back out, go to your desk that night, start drawing it up, and find out you've forgotten to take one measurement that you needed, and have to hike back in the next day to do it again. It'll ruin your whole day. So what I would do, I would sit down on the bank and draw it out roughly in my little write in the rain notebook to make sure I had all of the measurements I needed before I left. And this is when I started seeing them, because they'd get curious of why this person is back in the woods 6 miles, hadn't been anybody there in 400 years. It's old growth timber, and there's no game of any kind under old growth timber. There's no feed. And so here, nobody'd been there, like I say, 400 years old. The timber was 400 years old, and nobody'd been there in that time. So here's this guy sitting there drawing, and they'd come in and see what I was doing, peek at me. And that's when I started seeing them. For a long time, I thought they only had one eye, just was out this side of the tree or out this side of the tree. Just, but yeah, that's how I got started. That's where I first saw
So,
my.
so you could actually see them, or at least a portion of their face,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
describe to me how far away were they and what did they look
Oh,
like?
they'd be close. They'd be 20, 30 feet away, just peeking through the timber. That timber is awfully tight up there, and they have to be pretty close to be able to see you. Sometimes they were further, but not very far. But and you'd be walking in, hiking in, and step across a little no-name stream. In the middle of it's a sandbar with a 16-inch footprint in the middle of it, and the water still seeping into the footprint. Well, somebody didn't come there and make that. That'd be about the height of stupidity, wouldn't it? Hike in 3 miles to make a footprint in a stream when nobody's been there years and years and years and not likely to again. And then I find it, that's not going to happen. So yeah, that just added fuel to the fire. It just kept me going. And I'm probably the most curious person you'll ever know in your life. I've got to know the whys and the wherefores. And so I spent from 1970 basically um, until 2010, just doing that type of work. The closer I got to them, the more comfortable I got with them. And I had an opportunity one time to just sit and watch them for about 20 minutes. First time I'd ever done that. And my partner and I had been playing with the elk. It was September, and the elk were bugling, and we always are in the woods when the elk are bugling. If you haven't been there, you have to. It's one of nature's spectacles. And we'd finally busted up this herd. The herd bull was rather upset with us. So, and of course, we'd gotten separated by that time, but we were both foresters. We knew how to get our way back to the roads again. And so I was hiking out, and I saw this clearing ahead of me in the timber. And usually in that country, that meant water, and you never know what you find around a water hole. So I sneaked in very carefully and peeked around this big Sitka spruce tree, probably about 8 foot on the butt, and just peeked around it to see what was there. It wasn't a water hole; it was a little patch of blown down timber. One of those little microcosm windstorms blew down about 5, 6 acres of timber, and right along the edge of it, there were 2 bears feeding. They were picking mushrooms off the down timber. And so I decided to watch them for a minute. And then one of them stood up and looked around. There wasn't no bear. And he was about 30 feet from me. Great big male Sasquatch. And so I watched. I got really quiet then and just watched. And pretty soon the female stood up, looked around. And they were just looking for, danger, watching for danger, and then they'd kneel back down and pick mushrooms. The little oyster mushrooms grow on dead logs, and they are absolutely delicious. I was envious of them getting them, and I just watched them. And then, well, probably about 20 minutes into it, I felt a gust of wind on the back of my neck. And when I did that, of course, four eyes just popped right on me. Bing, they had me made instantly. And so I just stood up, stepped away from the trees just so they'd see that I wasn't a threat to them. And she started, he stepped back so she could get by him. And as she did, she reached down and she picked up an infant and put it on her chest and then walked back in the timber. And as he turned to leave, I said, "Thank you for sharing your family with me today." And he turned back and looked at me, and I swear to this day, that's been since I think 1972. And I swear to this day that when I did that, he nodded his head at me before he turned and left. Uh, it was just, it was fantastic to watch, absolutely fantastic. And that was the first time that I'd had the opportunity to see full body what they were and to observe them in the dying Bossy Jane Goodall manner. Just observe their actions and reactions to one another. Listen to the noises they made, the sounds they made as they conversed, as they ate. And it was at that time I know these are not a dumb animal. These are a people of intelligence. And anybody who thinks otherwise is sadly mistaken. And because I watched them for 20 minutes and I watched them interact just like you and I would if we were there doing the same thing. And in the ensuing years, I had more and more encounters, got to know them better. Geez, I had one time in Northern California, actually in the Bluff Creek area, just about 20 miles beyond where Bob and Roger had their encounter. And he was trying to communicate with me, and we couldn't communicate at all, which told me that at that time I had not heard a mind speak or anything like that. But he never attempted that. I don't know whether he couldn't or I couldn't, but it's happened since then. But at that time, I really think that it's that all of them are not capable of that. Only certain ones are, and because my teacher certainly has no trouble with it. And but this fellow, and I was a family of three also, but their youngster was about 7 years old and a very precocious little guy. I was camped down the creek bottom on Blue Creek, which is just across the ridge from Bluff Creek, next ridge over. And I was had found a big old hollowed out, burned out fir tree, and I was using that as my tent. And when I put my sleeping bag out in it, I noticed black hairs there, but I figured had been a hibernation spot for bears during the winter. And since this was late May, the bears were not using it, and I didn't figure to be there when they came back to use it again. So I thought it'd be all right. Well, it turns out I don't think it was bears that it was home for. I think it was the home for these three Sasquatch. And they came in. I heard call, the ooh call, and then I heard an answer. One on one ridge and one on the other ridge behind me. And so I just got in a position where I could see, put my fire behind me because you don't want your fire in front of you, you can't see. And just sat and watched. And they came in and they spent most of the night there with me. And the male and female would talk back and forth and what they call chatter. But
Samurai chatter.
yeah, samurai chatter type silence. Pardon my mold, my memory lapses on me time to time. But and they'd talk back and forth. The little guy, he'd sneak in and wrap my tree with a stick, and his mom would chew him out, and he'd take off, and then pretty quick here he's back, about like any 8, 9 year old would do, And it was just fantastic to go through to spend that night that way. And finally, about I don't know, it was an hour or two before daylight. I was worn out. I'd worked all day, and then made that hike in, and so I said, I gotta get some sleep. I spread by my sleeping bag, crawled in it, and they left. Then they were gone in the morning, but I had a plethora of tracks around there. It was absolutely fantastic. What a night! What a night that was. I just picked up then and hiked out, but I had seen the whole gamut there again, the interactions between them and his attempts at communication. You know, the first thing you do when you're speaking to somebody that doesn't speak your language, you speak louder, thinking that'll help. Which we even tried that, it didn't work. But yeah, that was quite a night.
What do you think they were trying to communicate to you?
But that I was in their home. Probably. I mean, that's retrospect, but I think that's probably what it was. Maybe he just wanted to make connection. You know? That's happened since several times, but yeah,
Well, I
it's
assume that you've heard the Sierra sounds that Ron
oh
Moore
yeah,
has.
yeah. Ron's a good friend.
Yeah, and so how did this compare with that kind of
Same.
language?
That's what I'm talking about. That same type of language. That you know, I can't do it, but the chatter. That when they were talking amongst themselves, that's what I was hearing. And the there's a whistle they do. And when I was talking, what I first telling you about when I was doing the bridge site surveys, I'd hear that a lot. And I just thought it was some type of bird that I'd never classified. And but first time I heard Ron's tapes, that's in there. It's on track 7. And that's what that is. And I've since figured out that was just one of them telling another one. I've got him inside over here. I'm watching him. And that's what they do. Anybody that comes into their territory, they're watching. You may not see them, but they're watching you. I guarantee you. They know
Yeah,
everything you do. From the time you turn off the paved road, they know you're there. Okay. And and pretty much they know your heart. They know what's in your heart. I've never had a problem with them. I've never had problem one. They're a very benevolent, loving people. And people who have trouble with them do so because they don't respect them. Now, if you get between a mother and a child in any species, you're in trouble. You're in the wrong place. You need to get out. And they may make you think that you've been attacked and everything else. But really it's just protecting themselves. Okay. Now these idiots that shoot at them, they deserve whatever they get. Okay. Well, yeah, they're violent. I shot at it 17 times. Well, if somebody shot at me 17 times, I'd probably be violent too. You know? And so yeah, whose fault's that? One of the books I've written is on encounters. I've got 32 encounters in it. The book is called Sasquatch Face to Face. And it's amazing how many of those face-to-face encounters the person tells how absolutely petrified they were. They were so scared they could not move. And all it's doing is standing there looking at them. The fear is all here. You know, it's not there. It's here. It's your own fear that you're building up. It's in your mind. Okay. If you're a species that's trying to say unknown, trying to stay out of the limelight, the last thing you're going to do is attack the dominant species in your biome. That's going to show you to them faster than anything in the world. Right?
I think so. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's why with the mind speak information, it's like they're receptive when you're receptive and vice versa. And
Yes.
so I think that opens up a door of harmony between the two of you energetically where you can communicate together.
Yes, I believe that's very much so. And they knew who they can work with. Since I've gotten my teacher, since I met him, he tells me who to work with, who to go with. That's why right now I'm helping 3 people write their books. And these are all people that, that I've worked with from their inception. And, we've got a group here. It's run by Barb Shoup. I don't know if you know Barb, but she's one of the most fantastic researchers in the world. She's got, I don't know, 80, 90 people in this group, and she does it right. When they have an encounter, they get together and they reenact it. You'd be amazed at how much you can learn from a reenactment. If somebody has, every morning, first thing they do in the morning is get together, sit down and go through and talk about what happened yesterday, what their experiences were. So the whole group knows about it, and it's recorded. She can go back right now and tell you, May 19th, 2017, we were here and this happened. She got it on tape, on video. Pardon my age. Tape. We used to have tape, but great people. And these people are actually a good number of them are people that came to me for one reason or another. And I referred them on to Barb. Had another one just yesterday came to me, same way. Just because I know my name's out there, so people, if they want to have questions, they come to me, and if they want to investigate, if they're the right type of people and have the right thing in mind, right attitude, I'll take them out and introduce them to Barb, and they'll go out and have a ball. And I know there's 4 or 5 in our group right now that came to us that way. They're stalwarts. They're great. And like I say, 3 of them are writing books. So that's how we learn. That's how things happen here.
Yeah, it's good
Yeah,
to get that information out there for sure. So like you
absolutely.
said, you think they're a type of people. Do you
Yes.
think they're purely flesh and blood, or do you think there's something else going on?
Oh, they have some special powers. But my teacher tells me we have no powers that you did not at one time have. The difference is you quit adapting to your environment and started adapting your environment to you. And we did. We moved indoors about 35,000 years ago. Okay. Now, when you move indoors, you don't need to talk ridge top to ridge top anymore. You're talking across the fire. So if you don't use telepathy in our body, if you don't use it, what happens? You lose it.
Mhm.
There's still vestiges of it, but we don't do it as we once did. And he tells me that every power that they have, we once had. So who's to say that they're any different than we are? Just that we've evolved in a different direction. That's all. Look at the DNA work. If you take their hair, and for some reason we can only get mitochondrial DNA from their hair. We can't get nuclear DNA from it. We can from ours, but we can't from theirs. If you send that hair out for forensic examination, it comes back unknown non-human primate. Send it out for DNA analysis and it comes back pure human. Now, how does that happen?
Right.
Okay. Now, when you get to take other tissue and get the nuclear DNA out of it, there are non-human markers in that, about 2%. Okay, non-human markers. The kicker there is in the 2.3 billion samples in GenBank, it isn't there. We don't know what it is. It could be extraterrestrial, but I really think it's probably proto-human that we don't have DNA on yet. Something like 92% of all primates that have ever lived, we don't have record of any kind of record of. But something like Homo heidelbergensis, Homo africanensis, something like this that we don't have DNA on that was close enough to us, like Neanderthal, to crossbreed. I think that's probably where they came from. But
Exactly.
that's theory according to Thomas. Okay, that's not not anybody's tried and will. And I do want to make that statement. Everything you hear from me is what I've seen through my eyes. And we all see things differently. Take five eyewitnesses to the same event and you'll get 5 different versions of it. Okay, because we see it through our own eyes, and our own thoughts are tempered by our own experiences. And a person who goes out and expects to see a monster, they're going to see a monster. Okay. The person like me who knows the benevolence of them is going to see a benevolent person. Okay, so when I tell a story or tell an anecdote, it's through my eyes that I've seen it. It's the truth as I know it. It may not be the truth as you know it, but it is what I know and I believe to be right. Okay, and there's proof. There's proof, absolute, irrefutable proof of their existence. A good example is the Patterson-Gimlin film. Oh, look at the arguments on that. They attacked Bob, they attacked Roger, they attacked Bob's kids so bad, and his wife had worked that they had to just totally stay away from it entirely for 30 years. Okay. Just people being people. But
Exactly.
you take that film, and I can show you just in an instant that it has to be what it is and not a human in a suit. And that item is called intermembral index. And what that is, it's a scientific constant fact. You'll find it, read it in any anatomy class in any college in the country. It's the ratio of your arm length from your shoulder to your wrist as compared to your leg from hip to ankle. In humans, that ratio is 72. Now, don't get the idea that every human in the world is going to be exactly 72.000. That's the center of the bell curve. There will be variations. Okay. But 3 standard deviations is going to give you 99.8% of all humanity is going to be in that with 3 standard deviation range of that 72. Sasquatch, Patty, her intermembral index ratio of her arm to her leg, and you can see that in frame 79. Pardon me. In frame 79, it's from the back. She's walking, her legs are straight and her arms are straight. Measure the two of them that way. It's 84. Every Sasquatch picture that you get, do that to, and it'll tell you instantly whether it's real or it's a man in a suit. Now, AI is fouling things up because they can do anything they want to with that. Okay, be that as it may, if the picture is genuine, you can tell. All right. Most people don't know that factor, so even the AIs are off if they're drawn. But that's an anatomical fact. Okay. I've done it, the 4th of July footage, the one in the mountains reaches down, picks up a baby and walks off. Genuine. The one where the Boy Scouts found the nest and it's up on the ridge walking, genuine. Paul Freeman's, genuine. I've done the intermembral index on all of these. The only one I haven't been able to do yet is the one that ran across the field. Again, that ABC did a de-hoaxer on that. They used a sprinter to run the same course. What they never told you is, yeah, the sprinter ran it as fast as the creature did. The sprinter wasn't in a, if it were a person in a suit, wasn't in a mask and suit. The sprinter was also fell each of the 5 times he ran. They just pieced that together from 5 pieces of film to show him running the whole distance. They didn't bring that point out. But that's the type of thing you deal with when you're dealing with the media at all, which is why I never deal with them. But yeah, I forgot where I was now. Oh,
Well, let's
intermental index.
let's
But
let's yeah, exactly. Yeah, proving that the film that is what it is, and there's proof out there that they really do exist.
uh yes, and
Let's
another
let's move on to I know when because you're kind of in the same neck of the woods where Ron Moorhead was in that general
yeah.
area.
Mhm.
Let's talk about some of his experiences and see how they compare, because you spent so much time in the woods in this area. He saw a lot of things. So first of all, he heard a lot of sounds that he couldn't visibly see. Now, did you
Right.
have any of those kinds of, not just vocals, but just things that were out of context and you couldn't put your finger on?
Oh, always, yeah. That, of course, that's gonna happen in the woods, and they're not all Sasquatch related. There's lots of things out there that we don't know about. And there's lots of animals that make different sounds depending on what they're doing. If you've ever heard a fox call when she's in heat, that'll raise your roof right up. I mean, it's a screech. It's unbelievable. Uh, Unbelievable stuff. Uh, but I've learned most of these because I have lived my life in the woods my whole life. I owned a logging company and if I were doing it, it was in the woods somewhere. And so I did get to know a lot of things, but just like I was telling you about that whistle, that I went from 1972 to 2010, not really knowing what it was, thinking it was a bird, and it wasn't. Okay. And there's a million of those types of things, give or take 100. And they're just sounds that you don't know what they are when they occur. Uh, their howl, their long howl, I don't know if my throat will allow me to do it, but that howl that they make, break that down sometimes, slow it down. That's the first thing you got to remember. The samurai chatter, when Scott Nelson started to, no, not Scott, anyway, when he started analyzing it for voice, he had to slow that down over 50% before he started getting the morphemes. Okay, before the syllables started coming out. You take that long howl and you slow it down enough, and all of a sudden there's a waveform in it. And I've got that in my book, Sasquatch the Proof. And I show that. But that waveform matches the waveform from the Sierra Sounds. I've done the same thing with that, and my own. So there's conversation in the middle of that long howl. It's just out of our range of hearing. Okay. Number one, their voice goes to from about 10 hertz up to 50,000 hertz. What's ours? 20 to 20,000 for perfect hearing. Okay. Mine's about 5 to 15 now at my age. Okay. And as different people have different levels, but a perfect human hearing is 20 cycles to 20 hertz up to 20,000 hertz. Theirs goes to 50,000. There's a whole range there. I've got a waveform that shows 5 decibels in one note. And no human can do that. There are humans that have 5 decibel ranges, but not in one note. I have one note waveform picture of 5 decibels. That's remarkable, absolutely remarkable. So they can make a lot of sounds that more than what we've heard. And they do, when they speak with one another, they use one set. When they're speaking with us, they use a totally different set. So But in answer to your other question, there are so many things out there that we don't know about that make sounds that sometimes you just have to shake your head and say, I don't know what it is. You know, and that happens. My
Exactly.
research method is to find a place like what's on my background there, open up my chair, sit down, open my ice chest and grab a chicken hip and a Diet Pepsi, open my Kindle and read, and wait for them to come to me. That's my research, okay? There's no sense in walking around. They know you're there. If they don't want you to see them, you're not gonna see them. I don't care what you do, okay? And if you sit down, they'll get curious. They'll come in and they'll look, see why you're sitting there. And just be alert. They're very hard to see in any kind of timber, any type of brush, because being as dark as they are for the most part, they blend in. They create just another shadow. They're just another shadow figure. And I did a test one time many years ago. I had a group of people that were on a hike, and I stationed 3 people in dark clothing along that hike and had them take pictures of the hiking group as they passed by. None of them saw any of the 3. Okay, that's how we are. We see what moves most quickly, and it's got to be stark enough to be able to see. If it's quiet and in the shadows, you'll never see it. That's how they work. They're the ultimate in stealth.
Have you ever seen any craft or orbs while you're out in the woods?
One of the books I'm working on with a friend right now is on orbs, and you should wait till you see that. It is 100. Right now, I've got 162 pictures of the most strange and unusual orbs you've ever seen in your life. Yeah, I don't. What are they? There are many things I think, but I don't know for sure what any of them are. Other than energy. I called the book Orbs, the Energy of Life. Uh, but yeah, that'll be out probably in another week or so.
Can you
But
give us a sneak, can you give us a sneak preview of kind of what's so unusual about some of these orbs?
the directions they go, reverse directions. Some are, some are round, some are elongated. Some you can see faces in. Uh, we're gonna leave it up to the reader to decide what it is. We'll tell what
Yeah.
we know, which isn't a great deal, because we're learning. It's a brand new science. And I don't care what the scientists say, it is a science. Uh, I've got a degree in the science field, and I know scientific method. I also know that a true scientist accepts what another has and then tests it. Okay, their theory is if the evidence is not reproducible and testable, it's not evidence. Well, that's not entirely true, because eyewitness evidence is admissible. It'll send a person to the gas chamber, okay? And so it's ought to be admissible in science too. At least it's a place to start. It's a null hypothesis to work from. If you don't think it's true, do something to disprove it. Don't just say that's not right. Then you get people. There was a professor at a noted professor, who said he examined the cast footprints from the Patterson-Gimlin film, and they have to be fake because they're all different. If it was made by the same foot, they'd all be the same. And my jaw dropped. Are you that ignorant of tracking, but will still comment on it? Because it's exactly the opposite. If they were all the same, that would be suspicious. When you're walking, you put your foot down differently, you step down in different media. You got a hard spot, a soft spot, different hard spots, different soft spots. They're all going to be different. Sometimes all the toes will be down, sometimes only 4 of them are down. Occasionally only 3 of them are down. This happens. This is tracking. This is making tracks. They're not uniform, you know, but this guy gets out on national TV and makes a statement like that. And of course, 90% of people, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. No, it's not right. It's not right. It's dead wrong. But you know, he's got the letters behind his name. I don't. Makes a difference.
So what else can you tell us? And you have such a vast period of time that you've studied these things, so much experience in the woods. You know, what else can you tell us that my audience might not understand or know about Bigfoot?
Oh, gee, that's kind of hard because so many people don't know enough. They live in a family group, 2 to 3 families per clan. Clan size is dependent strictly on food, how much food is available, and how much food is available this time of the year. Because this is the worst time of the year for food for wild beings. Okay, we're coming out of winter. Spring hasn't come yet. Spring growth is not here yet, but all the winter's growth is dead. Okay, the animals are all in their least favorable conditions. So now's what determines the carrying capacity of the land. Okay, so the size of the clans, and not also this time of year, the clans from the high country are down in the low country because they're snowed out up above because their food's snowed out. Okay, that's why they come down the mountain. It's because the elk and the deer and the things they feed on come down the mountain. Okay, wintertime in our area, you'll find them in great numbers along the beaches because the most protein per acre anywhere in the world are tidal lands along the oceans. Okay, and here, our part of the northern tier, the lowest tides are in the middle of the night. So they can feed out on those beaches in the middle of the night with total impunity. There's nobody out there in the wintertime in the middle of the night. And so they can feed up the storm out there then. But pardon me, spring, it's the worst time for them as it is for every animal out there. So the fact that they live in a family group, the other thing is their population. I have identified in the state of Washington 20 clans. And of those clans, 13 to 18 individuals, there's about 300 individuals live in the state of Washington. Okay, let's get back to the question of why don't we find a body? Two very good answers. Number one, they bury their dead with ritual, with ceremony. Number two, 300 people, they live about 100 years. So that's 3 a year die in 72,000 square miles. What are your chances of finding anybody at that population rate? Okay. Have they ever found same people, have they ever found a bear's body? Yeah, I've found some elk bodies and I've found some deer, but I've never found a bear. I've never found a cougar body because they disappear quickly. And it's the wee beasties that make them disappear the fastest. Oh yeah, the scavengers will pick the bones clean, but it's the wee beasties that get rid of the bones, the microbes and the little bugs and stuff. University of North Carolina did a study on that. They staked a deer carcass out, and in 1 week it was totally gone. Okay, same thing here. And that plus the fact you add in the fact that they bury their dead, and I can show you some pictures. I've got pictures of some graves, and you'd never recognize it for what it is, and you will never find the being in the grave because it might be buried 3 feet deep, or it might be buried 20 feet deep. And there are stones on top of it. There are trees transplanted on top of it. You'd never recognize it for what it is if you didn't know. Okay. Some of the
How
others,
did you discover that? How did you discover that was
my
one of their graves?
my teacher,
I
my
see.
teacher told me. what to look for, where to look for it. And then when I found one, he identified it as that's true. But yeah, that's one thing. And the other thing is, please, if you want to leave gifts for them, that's fine. If you want to leave food, that's fine. But do it with some common sense. Don't leave high sugar items. They don't have dentists. Okay. And I'd hate to face even my teacher if he had a impacted wisdom tooth. Okay. My two personal favorites are apples and peanut butter. They're universally liked. They're healthy. And the fact I love to see those big fingerprints in that peanut butter jar. It's a total trip. Uh, it's fun. So that makes it fun for me too. Leave the cap on, they'll open it, they know how. And another thing you might add is, it's like I said, we're back to total population. In North America, I think there's probably not more than 15,000. Okay. I also know that when they take a mate, in this area in BC that's pictured behind me, the clan there, we got to be pretty knowledgeable of in 5 years of working with them all the time there. And the daughter of the clan leader, name is Rajase. Rajase was just the age to take a mate. Okay. In order to meet her mate, she went to Oklahoma and met him there. And they do that so that there won't be any inbreeding with them. When they mate for life. And I mean for life. If their children are almost to teenage and something happens to one of them, the other one won't remate even. Okay. One mate, one life, one mate. And they're very true. They're some wonderful things about them. I got Roman Rajase got pregnant, 15th of January 2015. I sat in the presence of 18 male Sasquatch and watched her give birth to twins. Twins are very rare, but she had twins, and it was almost like a royal birth the way it was treated. It was fantastic. And the first thing they do when they're born is they take them to the water, to the creek, and wash them off. And it does the same thing that the doctor holding them up and swatting a baby on the butt does. Man, do they scream. And it gets the lungs started. Okay. And you've never seen anything cuter than that little bundle of fur of newborn Sasquatch. And she just puts them on her chest and they hold on. They'll just hold on to her right there. One on each, she had one on each breast by the time we got done. But that was fantastic, fantastic. That was probably the single best day I've ever had in my life. Yeah, it was unreal, unreal.
Well, I can imagine that would be an extraordinary experience. I've never heard of anyone
Yeah.
that was that close with them and had that kind of liberty with them to be able to witness something like that.
It's it's been so many years. They know me, they know my heart. I don't want them even proven to exist. Because if our government had to take, oh my heavens, can you imagine a zoo that would be? Look at their track record with indigenous people and tell me you want them in charge of Sasquatch. First of all, what would they do? Because Sasquatch is not going to listen to them. They're going to do what they want to do, what they need to do. Then you're going to have people like Sierra Club, Friends for Animals, trying to close off all wilderness to protect the Sasquatch. No, to keep you out. That's what they wanted to do forever, to end all hunting and keep you out of the wild places. Okay. There'd be a war. There'd be a war. Then you'd have the other side. Well, we're just going to eliminate them. That way those woods will be open again. That attitude. I just couldn't imagine what would happen if government had to step in. Milton Friedman was the economist for like 4 or 5 presidents. And he said, if you put our government in charge of the Sahara Desert, in 5 years, there would be a worldwide shortage of sand. And he's right. He's absolutely right. And can you imagine what would happen? It's scary. It's absolutely scary. But that's how close I've gotten to them. My teacher has been very, very beneficial that way. When he recruited me, it was for a specific job. That was to tell their story. And that's why I've written 13 books on them. And those are available at my website. And you just take my name, put a .com behind it. That's my website. They're also
Sounds
available
good.
on Amazon.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds like you
Yeah.
have a lot to offer to the Bigfoot community as to your knowledge of these.
And I'm always open for questions. Always. I'm almost 81 years old now. I live in an assisted living facility. I can't get out and camp like I used to. I have to get around with a cart, motorized scooter. And so when our camp house come, I get to go up to camp for a day and then have to come home at night because I can't sleep out. I went to this area in Canada last September, and that did not end well. Ended up with bronchial pneumonia. And but it's just such a wonderful, wonderful life with them. It really is. So many things have happened in Georgia at a gathering we had there annually. Sitting at the campfire, 18 of us around a campfire, and 2 of them show up standing right behind my chair at the campfire. Right in plain sight, 18 people there. You want to see some surprised people. I get called a liar for that. I said, well, you're going to call 18 people liars. And one of whom was a Georgia Superior Court judge. Because
Wow.
they all saw it.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's just amazing. I think that you have at least recorded your experiences, and you've given that information back out in the form of your books, and I thank you for doing this interview today as well. It's just another forum where you're able to share all of this knowledge. I'm going to go ahead and end our interview today, but Tom, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll let you know when this comes out.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an absolute total pleasure. We're talking about my favorite subjects in the world, about my favorite people in the world. So anytime you have a question, don't hesitate to get a hold of me. And it goes for everybody. You can reach me through my website. There's a contact Tom there. Just click that and it sends an email right to me. No problem at all.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'll also have a YouTube site that's just got some videos on it that I've made and presentations that I've done and such like that. It's just a casual thing. But if you want to see more, go there. Okay.
Okay, I will be doing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.